Okay, hello everybody. I'm Matthew Rogerson. I work for NS Media Group, looking after packaging trade publications, so like Packaging Today, Converting Today, Packaging Converting Intelligence, and various other ones.
I'm Nick Asbury. I'm a writer for branding and design. I work at Asbury and Asbury.
Hi, I'm Harriet. I'm a designer at Pearl Fisher and also a tutor for Falmouth University.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a freelance writer and strategist, and I work with branding agencies.
Hi, I'm Lara. I'm the design director at Johnson Banks. I'm a graphic designer.
Hi, I'm Jamie Ellel from Supple Studio. I'm the creative director and founder, and also a graphic designer.
To start and kick off the moderating panel today, I've got a list of the chosen work and picked by, and I believe the idea is to discuss your chosen work. Will be put up on the screen, kind of what about it it's kind of speaks to you and what your kind of thoughts are, and then we'll go from that to the Q&A. So to start with, the first one I've got here is for Harriet, for Knivi whiskey, and yeah, who knows? So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I spent 2 days looking at this. I absolutely loved this piece of work. It just really stood out compared to a lot of the other whiskey and booze brands that were submitted both in the packaging awards this year, but just in general. Imagine this on the shelf in your local supermarket or online. It's just so different. I love the no frills, no foils approach, and it works really nicely going through the post. So it's exactly the right width, and the outer is really simple. Flat pack it down and recycle it afterwards, so there's no worrying about contaminating the different recycling streams coming through. It also takes a lot of inspiration from the process of making whiskey. I think this is like, they've got like this distillery up in Scotland where they just go off and do mad experiments and see what works, and then they create these different limited edition batches. So that's why the design is quite raw and simple, and it takes a lot of inspiration from that distillation process. When you pull out the card inner, there's a wonderful illustration of the process that they go through and the mash tuns and everything like that. And there's something quite undesigned about it, which I know is quite a fashionable thing at the moment. But I think this one's just been done to a really high standard, bringing in these kind of pastel colours into the whiskey category as well feels quite fresh to me. We're always expecting it to be really rich purples and blues and greens and like just really dark, heavy, manly. Look at my wonderful library colours. And this feels like it will sit in a lot of a younger person's like wall, and you'd want to have this out, you'd want to have it on display. I feel like the outer and the secondary packaging, like that appealed to me more than the actual bottle label itself. But as a whole, it works really well. And I think the language as well, obviously within the juries this year, there were copywriters. So we had 2 copywriters in the packaging jury, and they really liked the way that the copy on here was really no nonsense. It just had a real nice flair to it though. It wasn't too flowery. But yeah, in general, it just really stood out to me, and I think it did quite well. But like all of the panel really got excited about it.
That's really nice, actually. I also haven't seen anything that looks like that in that category. And it's kind of following what we saw in cosmetics last year with kind of ready for social media. So it's the kind of thing you can take a photo of and send it across multiple channels to kind of show off what you're drinking and have lots of other people get really excited by it, which normally is not the case when you look at the whiskey category.
That's true. It's not so fusty, is it? That's a really good point. It is very social media worthy, especially when you add in the fact that they're really limited batches as well. So you can start to share and like have a different experience from other people. Like that limited edition desire is there, but without having, you know, extra fancy outer packaging. There's something in that lightweighting as well, which is really important. I think the fact that I think at the moment this is just being sold on Amazon, so it's pretty much just ready to go off the shelf. You don't really have to wrap it up too much. So, you know, you've got your primary packaging, your secondary packaging, and then whatever Amazon wants to ship it in. But normally you'd have to like pad it out even more, but because of the beautiful cardboard engineering within the secondary packaging, there's really not much need for bubble wrap and all of these, like adding in extra materials. So for sustainability purposes, it really answers the brief that we all should be thinking about. And that was something that we were really conscious of within the judging panel this year, I think. Not only in the sustainability section, but just in general, we felt like if you want to get one of those really high up pencils, you have to be thinking holistically and really show that you are thinking about sustainability, where your materials are coming from, as well as how it looks and the function and, you know, the writing style. So yes, sustainability, I think, should really be part of our thinking when we're designing now.
Well, in which case I shall go from Harriet to Rebecca, who is next.
Hi. So I want to talk about a really fabulous piece of work called All Watched Over, AWO. Now, when you are confronted with something like that, where do you even start? What I love about this piece of work is this is about data rights. This could so easily have been so dry, so boring, and look at it, it's making data beautiful, not just visually, but verbally. It's using poetry to talk about data. I mean, I just think that's magical. I think it's wonderful. And it actually, it's not only beautiful, it's actually really effective communication, because data is such a, like data rights is such a complex, abstract subject. I mean, I don't even know where I'd start writing about it. And so I think using poetry to take something abstract and help you communicate it and understand it in a way that actually reaches you, actually touches you, and actually helps you to figure out in your own head what this means for you. It's not just beautiful writing, it's really clever, really effective communication. I mean, I'm a big fan of poetry in general. I love seeing more experimental writing out there, and I think that this is really just such a good example of gold standard, how to use really creative, really experimental writing, but still communicate your point really, really well. I think there's a really good balance of beautiful visual writing, visual imagery painted with words, and very simple, very effective writing that just makes the whole brand really stand out. And so these posters that you're seeing, they are what was submitted to us, what we loved. But then I dug deeper into the brand because I wanted to see, is this just surface level and the rest of it's a little bit boring? But actually there's really beautiful writing throughout the whole brand, and there's a really great balance of poetry and simple, elegant prose to communicate what this data rights agency is all about, what they do. And it really makes you see actually understand the importance of data rights. Like, it's not something most of us kind of really properly think about, but as they say in this project, it's actually a really important, it's really important for our age, thinking about what we do with our data, who owns our data, who owns our digital lives. So they're actually dealing with really important issues, but they're communicating in a way that's genuinely effective and genuinely stays with you. Like, that imagery genuinely stays with you. So I just, all in all, found this such an important project, but also such an impressive feat to take poetry and data rights and clash it together in such a beautiful way. I absolutely love this. And the design is really elevating the writing, and the writing is elevating the design. I know there was quite a lot of they went really broad on their references, which I think is really positive. I would love to see more of that kind of thing when we're thinking about writing for design and brand design in general, really going wide on the references. So they have like some very beautiful, obscure poetry references. They've got some typographic references. They've mashed in coding, and you just get this completely original, completely amazing piece of work as a result, because it's going so far out of their comfort zones to look at what they can bring in that will make something original.
You know, I'm sure to outsiders this could look like kind of a high flown,
Totally.
intelligent piece of work, but there are some sectors and some projects and some clients where you can do that, and I think it's, as you were saying, it's appropriate to the job it's trying to do. It's trying to start intelligent conversations, trying to get people to see data in a different way, and yeah, it's completely, it justifies the creative approach, I think, in a really good way.
Yeah, I think it's very thought-provoking, and it really needs to be thought-provoking. It's not thought-provoking in a kind of more advertising-y, sort of grabbing your attention, aggressive way, but you sit and you read it and you really think about what it's saying, and it gets to you. It makes me think, oh my God, what are people doing with my data? I don't know. Feels like panic now. It stays with you, and I think that's a very rare quality to find in a lot of commercial writing, but one that we can absolutely, definitely put into our work through a more considered approach.
It was also really fit for purpose in the way that I think where they used the what they submitted to us was the posters, but the posters were all throughout the lobby area in their office, and it gave a nice, like, there was that great balance of lightness, so it's not like, obviously the information is, can be very heavy, as you say, and it gave sort of a welcoming, accessible approach to what they're doing, and you don't have to read it and kind of take a gasp at the protection issue and the rights issue, and it's just really nice that they're lawyers and they were willing to take this kind of light-hearted but very thought through kind of design solution. So some of the posters, the egg and the just that beautiful like smile that you get when you read them is just very unique.
Yeah, as a sort of final thought, I think it's also a really good example of what can happen when a client is willing to go there and take a creative risk with their agency, and kind of some really beautiful work results. Because that approach is, I don't know, risky, but it's definitely pretty maverick. It's not what the average client would agree to, that's for sure. But I think when there's trust in that partnership and they go there, it can be a really beautiful result.
I think the execution really stood out as well. The obvious thing to do with a data client like that would be to use a very kind of techie monospaced data kind of typeface, like a machine readable thing. But instead they've gone for this like classic British Baskerville, actually like really jars with the words and the sector, and and then they've kind of just been really playful with that, almost like typewriter art. It's kind of, there's just so many references going on, and in a way that kind of, when I first saw them, I sort of didn't like them. I thought they were ugly, but then the ugliness just grew on me as I got to know more about the project. It was all just so appropriate. and so kind of clashy and like, yeah, just really memorable piece of design. And I think, you know, you could have, the agency could have taken those words and done something much more obvious with them, and it probably wouldn't be the thing we're talking about right now. You know, I don't think they would have done so well at D&AD. And yeah, it was really, really, really strong piece of work on every level. You know, the writing was particularly good, but I think the way they pulled it off and the execution was just so original and unexpected. I think that was the thing that really struck me.
Yeah.
I think this kind of naturally flows into the next project. Yeah, so this is another writing project, actually by the same writer, who's had a good year this year.
Very good year.
But, yeah, and yeah, I suppose I should preface it by saying that both Becca and I actually were, as writers, we were involved in judging both writing and design this year. And equally, the designers were giving their perspective on the writing, which is actually a really interesting. I think you just heard some of it there with, you know, Jamie and Lara talking about typefaces and that kind of thing.
The clothes.
No, I mean, without trivializing it, it's actually really useful to get a kind of broad range of opinions on the same piece of work. So yeah, this is another writing one, another poetic one. It's called 25 Sculptures in 5 Dimensions. And I think there was some kind of hesitation about this at first, because it's a kind of, it's essentially a kind of artistic event or happening.
Installation, yeah.
Kind of a series of like word sculptures that appear in this Swiss church in Covent Garden. And yeah, I think initially you kind of think, is this what D&AD is for, kind of thing? Is it a kind of art or poetry award scheme? But I'll perhaps kind of come back to that, because I think it does, again, completely justify itself once you get to know the project. And essentially, when you walk into this church, you have what seem to be a series of 25 white, empty plinths. But as you approach each one, you see that there's kind of these tear-off sheets of poems on the top of each one. And each poem is written to a very restrictive, formal structure. So there's, I think, it's 5 lines of 5 syllables each. And the idea is that each poem is kind of conjuring up a visual, sculptural, physical object. So it's like you're at a sculpture exhibition, but it's made entirely, it's made somewhere between the words on the page and then what that is doing inside your head. The 5th dimension that's referenced in the title of the project is kind of the human mind, the human consciousness. And I kind of love that we're talking on that kind of level while discussing D&AD awards. It kind of feel maybe that's how it should be. So yeah, it's a brilliantly crafted piece of writing. It's writing that's working with design. You know, the whole concept of those podiums and tear-off sheets just works really beautifully. There's actually a sound design element as well. There was a specially commissioned kind of soundtrack that worked to a kind of 5-beat musical structure, I believe. So there's lots of elements working together. And yet you're kind of, as a judge, you're looking at it thinking, okay, brilliant artistically, brilliant poetically, but what are we judging it as in a way? And strictly speaking, it was entered as a self-promotional piece within writing. But I think even if you judge it purely in that kind of slightly limited way, it's just brilliantly effective. You know, if you're a writer who wants to attract kind of poetic, imaginative, high-level kind of work, what better way to do it, really? And if you compare it to the kind of norms of what copywriters usually do to promote themselves, you know, you might have a creative mailer, you might have a website, it might be talking about grammar or slogans or the kind of things copywriters usually talk about. And this is just completely exploding all those expectations, I think, and kind of raising the bar for what writers can do. And I think that's my favourite thing about it, really. It doesn't necessarily mean that every writer from now on has to, you know, hire a church in Covent Garden. It's not necessarily that the scale of the project has to be big, but the thinking and the ideas and the creativity, that can be big. And I think it just sets that as a kind of challenge for everyone else, really. And just to finish off, I think for me, the big message it sends as a piece of work is that, because we're kind of judging writing here essentially as a kind of craft thing, that, you know, the category is called writing for design. It's kind of writing as a almost like a support service in a way that works for the design and exists in support of the idea. But I think when you look at something like this, it really, writing is the thing, you know, it is the idea. And I think that's a brilliant thing to kind of celebrate, really.
Yeah, I initially had a little hesitation over this project, not because I don't like it, I really like it, because as Nick said, I was a little bit on, is this the kind of thing that D&AD, like that we should be awarding at D&AD? Is this not more of an art installation? Is this not more suitable elsewhere? But I think Nick's right. I think it's really, what I love about both pieces of work is, you know, and Nick said they're both from the same writer, it's just taking the rule book and chucking it out the window, which I'm super pro personally. I think that as writers, we have always been able to do more than we tell ourselves we have been told, we have been allowed to do as writers on projects. And what I love is that this is a self-initiated project. Writing can literally build a sculpture in your mind. I think that's such a bold, cool thing to do. And I would love to see more projects like this. I feel like it's raised the bar. I need to do some kind of existential writing art project now to promote myself.
I think the self-promotional element of it is the really strong thing. I think that particular writer is just not your average writer, and so for him to do the usual self-promo thing just wouldn't fit. And you know, I think, you know, he's looking for more projects like that AWO one, and by doing such a thing as this 25 sculptures project, he is going to attract more of those clients that want to do brave stuff. So I just think it's perfect, really. You know, and again, the execution of it, you know, it's, you know, is writing for design, and as Harriet pointed out, it's almost like design for writing. But you know, he's paired up with the right designers for each of those projects as well, and they've really nailed it. The design for 25 sculptures is just so sort of pared back that you just read the words and you just imagine this thing in your head, rather than reading the words and thinking, oh, I really like that typeface. And you know, it's just kind of Helvetica. It's the quietest of all typefaces, you know, and it's just ideal. You know, it's just really, 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 really simple. And I think it's actually really hard to design something that, you know, it's all just kind of black and white, all just one weight of type. It's super quiet. And it takes a lot of kind of braveness to pull that kind of design off. So I think that element too.
When you've got someone like Jim and Studio Sutherland working on it, though, then that's the way that he works so beautifully, and so he really does love that pairing of copy and just the idea, and putting it in the right space just changes everything. So I wasn't surprised when it was with Studio Sutherland as well on that one, but it's beautiful. I haven't really looked into it, so really glad that you guys talked about that one.
So I think that's pretty fascinating stuff. I'm going to go to I think it's Jamie's turn now. So I'm going to pass through if there's nothing else to say on Nick's one.
Great. So yeah, so the piece of work that I chose to speak about, one of the things I was quite, I guess, vocal about during judging was this set of stamps for the Royal Mail on the subject of Marvel Comics. And the main set are essentially a set of illustrations that were commissioned by a British comic artist called Alan Davis. And then they've got these lovely little interactive stickers, speech bubbles, little kind of onomatopoeic kind of cracks and thwips and things, so people can basically kind of tailor their letter, create their own little kind of art pieces. So these were lovely, and you know, there was little details like they'd even put like a black key line around the Queen's head, which doesn't sound like much, but you're really, you know, I've designed a lot of stamps over the years, and you're really not allowed to kind of mess with things like that. So just the fact they've got away with those little details that just really integrate kind of head and the value into the design are really nice. The main set weren't really the kind of hero for me, pun intended. I think the miniature sheet, which you didn't show on screen there, but that's kind of like, usually it's the kind of poor cousin of the main set of stamps, but somehow they've kind of elevated that and really sold in the clients to do something really interesting. So the mini sheet is usually 4 or 5 stamps kind of grouped together, and then you design a border that goes around those stamps, and that's called a mini sheet. But what Interrobang did here is actually shook that up. They created essentially like a little comic book strip of probably about 10 panels, and then the beauty of it is 5 of those panels, you don't even realize at first, 5 of those comic book panels are actually stamps. Again, normally you'd only use one size of stamp on there and it would just be 4 the same, but they've actually mixed up the sizes in here as well. So you've got different sizes happening. And it's just a really, you know, really beautiful execution of what is normally, you know, the kind of bit of the brief when you get a set of stamps that you sort of go, oh yeah, I'll concentrate on the main set and then I'll do the mini sheet afterwards. It's a bit of an afterthought. It's kind of poor cousin. And they've, for me, that was actually the piece of the project that really stood out. You know, I felt like I'd kind of seen interactive stickers and things done before on stamps by Johnson & Banks, who did well in D&AD many years ago for their fruit and veg stamps. So it's kind of, that's not a new thing, although it's very appropriate for this, but that mini sheet I just thought was just really beautifully executed. And to get the client to do something they wouldn't normally do, you know, even just from a practical point of view, that means creating a new kind of die that kiss cuts those stamps out of the sticker sheet and things. So, you know, there's costs involved. And yeah, they've just done it really beautifully. It's really kind of on brand for both Royal Mail and Marvel. And I can just imagine, you know, fans, but also just, you know, my kids would love these stamps. You know, they'd be so excited to get a letter that had one of these stamps on it, or to send one with it. And it, you know, it's just kind of ticking loads of boxes from that point of view, and pushing things a little bit from a kind of Royal Mail point of view as well. So yeah, they really stood out to me. There were lots of stamps to judge, but these were the ones that, yeah, that just really grabbed me, I guess.
So I chose this project called Printed by Parkinson. It was done by the Charité University in Berlin. And basically it was a sort of sculptural exhibition sort of piece to raise awareness for Parkinson's. And I just, you know, kind of when we first looked at this project, they sent in one of the objects, which was the camera, and each of the pieces has been 3D printed. But what they've done is they've got I think 6 people to come in, and they sort of recorded their neurotransmissions and put them into plugged in their brain tremors into the 3D printer, and then reprinted the objects that they'd brought in that were significant to each person, and came out with these sculptures that basically communicates what's happening to them in a physical way. And as a piece of data visualization, which is what it was entered in for, I just thought it was just so immediate. You just see the piece and you know, and you read Parkinson's and you know exactly what it's about. But the sort of way that they'd gone about it was really true to the disease, but also, again, really accessible in the way that you kind of get it straight away. But they've just done it in such a beautiful, quiet, delicate way, and the way that they've presented the exhibition, they invited each of the people to, you know, have this object that was significant to them. And for one person, it was a ballpoint pen because they loved writing. And the way that, you know, you can physically touch the object, it's the size that it is, but it's completely you know, just changed in its form. And aside from the fact that it was an exhibition, the website that they've put together, the video that they've put together, the typography that goes with it, when you're watching each of the videos that do explainer videos of how they created these objects, the type kind of shifts ever so slightly, and it's just not over the top. The eye, Jim pointed out when we were judging, the eye is the little kind of, you know, the eye, the person, that's got a little jaggedy bit in it, and it's just very just nicely timed piece. And obviously the impact of raising awareness for the stigma that people with Parkinson's go through, and it's a great cause, and yeah, just a great use of technology, really. I just thought it was really, really nice and really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite an achievement to turn a 3D printer into something that kind of emotional in a way. I think those objects really are, you know, they work as work of arts, but they're also like communicating these people's stories and communicating the importance of the cause.
Yeah, I think whenever I've experienced 3D printing as well, it's just been like plastic things that are just like printed for, I've never really seen a reason for it. And this is, I don't know, it's such a good use of the tool, that I think it's carbon, or I'm not sure, it's not plastic anyway, and it rendered these amazing, like, the color of the objects and everything is just so like holistic in the way that they've looked at it. It's just really yeah, such a good.
I think it's interesting that project is beautiful, and the all watched over typography, it's kind of taking that romantic half of the brain and the science half of the brain and kind of finding this interesting place where they kind of overlap. And both of those projects do it, and bring one audience into another area that they maybe wouldn't have interacted with before. Yeah. Like you're saying about using 3D printing to do that. It's really interesting.
I think the thing I like most about it was just the kind of, Lara, you kind of made this point already in a way, but the kind of restraint with which it's done. You know, they don't go over the top, and they don't, because you sometimes get kind of ad agencies and design agencies kind of riding into a cause like this, and like they're going to solve everything, and you get a really over the top kind of case study video, and it's all laid on a bit thick sometimes. And with this, I thought it was just done with real, yeah, as I say, kind of restraint and respect, and there's a kind of understatement to it, which I think makes it more powerful, rather than try to kind of hit you too hard with a message kind of thing. It just kind of harnesses what design companies can do, which is kind of use this technology and have access to 3D printing and stuff, but it harnesses it in just a really respectful way for a cause you wouldn't expect, really.
Yeah, I mean, even on the website, the donate button, you have to really look for it. It's like tiny on the bottom of the page.
Yeah, like I think the thing that we really loved about it was that social impact of it as well. You know, that the awareness building and everything. Yeah, it was a real standout project.
Yeah.
So were there any heated discussions or contentious decisions? And if so, how were they resolved, or were they resolved? Are you still not speaking as a result of the...
Our heated discussion was literally on fire. It was for a Slayer album cover, which you couldn't release the record from the packaging unless you set it on fire with a single match that was magnetized to the cover of the album in a tiny copper coffin. And it was just so, it was really, it was just really bonkers. And, you know, there was a real kind of theatre to the whole thing. And from a kind of, you know, design perspective, it was terrible heavy metal kind of design. But it was just so perfect for the audience, and it did divide a few people, particularly Astrid, who was our head jury, who wasn't a fan, but I think she came around to it in the end.
When she got to burn it, yeah.
Yeah, when we set fire to it on the last day.
You did. Oh my goodness, we had that in our category as well. We didn't burn it, but we also had very heated discussions.
I think it was the video that kind of set it off. We were just like, no, after the video, the guy's voice and everything. But it was quite obvious from them that it was also tongue-in-cheek, and it wasn't supposed to be taken, you know, so seriously, which was quite nice in a way, that they were like laughing at themselves in a retrospective way, like this is the last hurrah, kind of, why not? So
there was some really nice finishes, and the paper engineering as well was quite impressive, and that little coffin, like that's a lot of effort to go to for just one tiny match.
Size thing, so they'd reduced the 7-inch to 6.66 inches. 666. Just
you can only play the record 6 times and then it stops working.
That's bonkers.
What I thought was really great about Hell P, I'm a big fan of Hell P.
It's cool.
The name Hell P alone is amazing. Is that it's just a project. It just made you smile. It just brought joy, and I think there were a few entries that were like that they just, like the Marvel stamps, it just made us smile on the judging. And yes, they were divisive, but I mean the Marvel stamps weren't, but Hell P was a bit divisive. But you know, it just makes you happy. It makes me happy anyway, that someone has done that and gone, like, really committed to the idea, like 100%. They really went there, and I think that is to be commended.
Yeah. It's funny, you get some projects like that where I think there are some people who would want to give it absolutely nothing, like it's the first thing that they throw out. And other people who are thinking, you know, immediate black pencil. The temptation in a way is to try and meet halfway or find some kind of compromise, but actually I think generally it's not very satisfactory if you do that. I think it's better if someone can change someone's mind. I think ideally when judging goes best is when you feel like at some point you've managed to change someone else's mind, and also at some point someone else has managed to change your mind, because then you feel like a real conversation is taking place, kind of thing. I went there with my you know, expecting to have a few battles on the writing front, just thinking, just because there always are, you know, I have done judging a couple of times before. But yeah, I didn't feel like we had any, there were some pieces of work I was thinking, I'm going to have to make a case for this because other people might not get it necessarily. But I really felt like all the writing got a really fair hearing from everyone. And yeah, there was a high standard of work in there, which really helped. So it's not like you're having to go scratch around to find good stuff. There was a lot of good stuff there. But yeah, I think we just had lots of very good in-depth conversations without any slugging matches.
I guess the next one is in terms of any themes which emerged across the categories or trends that the jury can draw out.
There was a lot of poetry.
Yeah,
there was.
We sort of flagged already, but you know, and also, you know, not just the kind of AWO stuff and the 25 sculptures, which is more in the arty end, but as Nick mentioned in the Royal Mail pack and stuff, where, you know, it's just a very kind of everyday kind of piece of poetry, very kind of populist, but really, really beautifully done.
There was a piece from Bankside, Bankside Placemaking Project, that had a really lovely poem in it as well. There's loads of poetry this year. It's great.
I think there's going to be a resurgence of fencing somehow.
There were 2 fencing projects.
2 fencing projects in the same category. Yeah. Red fencing projects. Yep.
Fencing as in the swashbuckling sense, not
Oh, okay.
putting fences up around.
Yeah, no,
Outside.
not physical fences.
I think in the packaging category, we were looking a lot at the ones that had like I want to say like a higher purpose, like brands that had like a bit of social responsibility and awareness. So ones that had a charity angle and things like that, so that it felt more than just a nice box. And it felt like it had more layers to it and a bit more substance, because we talked a lot about how none of us really trust politicians anymore. So we're looking a lot more to brands to give us this, you know, sense that they know what the hell's going on, and they're going to help guide us towards a better future. So that, and we're putting our money where our mouth is a lot of the time. So, and brands are aware of that.
Yeah, I thought the standard of writing this year was really high. Actually, it was. We've only talked about a few of the projects, but there's quite a good spread of work represented in that category. There's, as Becca was saying, there was Bankside and Sydney Film Festival as well, where they're quite big integrated schemes where writing is playing quite a big part in the whole idea. And then there's work for kind of big people like Royal Mail and British Library. So it's nice to see writing working for big brands in quite a public way. I should give a little mention to there's a writer who I think is only about 7 years old or something, Woody, who did the Woodisms project.
Yeah.
Which is actually a really nice range of posters and greetings cards based on phrases that Woody comes out with. He's a young autistic boy. And I just want to make the point that it's not like a sentimental choice to recognise that kind of thing. It was actually, they're really lovely phrases, and it takes creativity to come up with them and to actually notice them and jot them down and record them, which is what his father did. I think his father's illustrator who kind of turned them into artworks. So yeah, I just wanted to give a little mention to that. It was very nicely done.
Yeah.
What if he's the youngest copywriter ever to get a pencil?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I think more broadly, we're seeing a bit more creative use of words across different touch points, and I think that's a really positive thing. Would love to see more of that, just being a bit more, not just playful, just a bit more experimental with use of language as well, and kind of not worrying so much about the rule book and just more expression, which I think is really really important to see in writing more broadly.
I think it was quite clear that the copywriters had worked with the designers rather than coming on later on in the project, or the design was driven by the writing a lot more in the ones that were successful, and the ones that were more successful as well. It was quite clear, like I think with the Bankside one, there was the beautiful writing piece, but then the design maybe took it in a different direction to what you'd expect when you read the writing. So it's that kind of marriage that was really nice, and the ones that kind of went further in the sort of awards. Then you saw that they'd clearly worked together, and the turn was really kind of like considered by both the design and the writing sides.
What would you recommend in order to produce award-winning work?
As if it would be amazing if there was a formula.
Yeah.
Really.
I think it is a hard thing to pin down, I think, because I'm often aware when you see some pieces of work that get entered where, from the agency's point of view, you kind of think, how could we possibly have done that piece of work better? You know, it's like we've answered the brief, we've done it in budget, we've come up with something really effective and professional and beautifully executed, and you know, we've got a delighted client, and yet as a judge, you're kind of looking at it thinking it's got to do all those things in order to be awarded, but it's kind of got to do something else as well, something that just elevates it from because in some ways those pieces of work, they've already had their reward, which is just having a happy client and a successful business. And it's got to do something that goes beyond what's expected, or it's almost got to be like better than it needs to be, if you know what I mean. It's like you can make it as good as it needs to be to do the job, and that's often a brilliant achievement in itself. But if it's somehow better than it needs to be, those Marvel stamps, they didn't need to be that good. Royal Mail would probably have been happy with something like 20% less good or something. But it's like the pride that goes into it, and that kind of wanting to do it that bit better because of the sheer kind of joy of doing it better, really. I think it's something to do with that,
I think the way, I don't know, for me to distinguish between one pencil and another, I think when we were going to yellow from graphite, like there were quite a few in graphite, and then it really like, you know, drops, was that word iconic. And it kind of doesn't have to be iconic that you're going to remember it forever or anything like that, but it had to have a social purpose or something extra. And I think, like, for example, the record by Stormzy, I think the more you kind of looked into it and you looked around, you know, it was obviously like beautifully photographed, and the art direction was amazing, and the typography was really nice, and the craft and blah blah blah. But then you kind of, you know, what it signified was as a photographic piece, as a music piece, as a social piece, was for me why things kind of got further. It was the design served a purpose in the story.
Yeah.
I think also
Holistic.
work that stands by itself as well. I mean, obviously, as part of the judging, you're reading the supporting information, and I think we did really well to sort of read that for every single project and make sure we really sort of gave every project its chance. But for me, the projects that really jumped out and got, you know, made their way all the way up to those top level awards were the ones that just really didn't need an explanation, because they were so perfectly designed and written that the communication was all there in whatever that thing was you were judging. You didn't need a kind of 1,000-word essay to go with it to kind of get it. So I think just obviously, you know, D&AD for me is about big ideas and then beautiful execution and appropriateness and stuff. But those ones that kind of just stood alone and just did their job without all that other stuff really kind of just makes the judging process really easy. And also that also means, you know, that when they're engaging with their actual audience, whether that's a poster or whatever it is, that the audience will feel the same, because the audience isn't going to have the D&AD kind of like brief and solution that we've got. So, you know, it kind of communicates on that level as well.
Yeah, I think kind of just to echo what Jamie was saying, it's my first time judging, so it's been a real education on what the highest quality really looks like, and how do you distinguish it from everything else. And I think for me, what really came through is that it's really clear what the idea is behind the work. When we look at so many pieces of work when we're judging, and I think the stuff that stands out, especially when you're judging what's on the shortlist, is, do I understand the idea? Like, without reading loads about it, do I get it? And actually just to communicate that idea in a simple but really effective visual way, verbally, like that in itself is a real skill. And I think it's really important for award-winning work to have a strong idea at the core, and for that idea to be, it might not be simple, but it's a simplified version of that idea that you get it, you look at it and you get it. And then for the level of craft and consideration to be extremely high. What I loved about the award-winning pieces of work was that they're so considered across everything that they do, and they are really appropriate for the context that they sit in. And I think sometimes that can be missed, but with award-winning work, every single context is looked at, particularly for the integrated design stuff, it's really important to think about the context. So they're really appropriate for the context. The level of craft is really high, and the idea at the core is really strong and simple as well, and it connects with the right audience in the right way.